Welcome to Friday night's video on our Master Series. This is the 73rd video in our Master Series, I do believe, and the 4th video in our Mixing Concepts. In the last video, we talked about putting things in their place in the stereo field, and in this video, we wanted to address something that there's a video on my channel about a moving stereo field, and you can review that, but the concept needs to be related, because the concept at this stage when we start mixing is for you to make some notes about it and where that might be applicable and where to experiment with that, because the concept in a really simple production, you might not ever have to worry about a moving stereo field. In a more complex production, that let's say you've got this setup right here with these instruments for the verse, and in the chorus that you've got some other instruments in place, and maybe this instrument and this instrument aren't playing, and maybe the drums aren't playing, and you have to realign your stereo field for that section or that break or that movement or whatever that happens to be going on, that's going to cause you to have to reevaluate the entire stereo field and where things are in their place, which basically boils down to moving stereo field. That you've got everything set up for the verse and everything's perfect, but in the chorus you've got a different bunch of instruments for that verse or for that chorus or for a break or a transition that you need to re-evaluate and reconfigure where things are in the mix. The whole configuration of panning, depth, and all that kind of stuff. You know, whatever you might be doing, because basically the stereo field is moving from in one transition to one movement to the next movement to other transition or other break and things like that. And things might sound better moved around a little bit for that transition or break. This is a huge concept to get in your head, because so many people will get a static stereo field and thinking they're working with a four-piece band, that the whole four-piece band is just in their place on the stage and nothing is changing, which is ridiculous. If you get into a big prop production or some big movie score production and even some symphonic productions, that your stereo field is going to be moving between this movement and this break and this transition and this whop whop thing you did, you know, that the stereo field's moving around, and so you're going to be starting to mess with automation and all kinds of things, trying to figure out how to accomplish this moving stereo field so that at every movement, at every transition, at every break, and all those things going along, that everything sounds good where it's at. This is what I call a moving stereo field, and it's a huge and valid concept that you need to experiment with and take into consideration for what's going on. Not only can it help you make your production sound better of somebody you're working with, but as a composer and a producer, that it can help you to come up with all kinds of new ideas that things are moving around in the stereo field to make each section of movement sound as good as it possibly can, and or in different instruments coming forward and back in different sections, you know. And it's like, well, you know, things might be moving around a little bit, you know, during a production, you know, and that can get a little bit complicated and experimental, which would be the next thing, is that an actual moving stereo field, where I've got, just an example is, I've got this thing going along during the verse, and at the end of it, the bass player and the guitar player change places, either really quick or slowly, that right towards the end they switch places, and then bop, bop, you know, something like that. That's just like, it's real obvious the guitar is over there and the bass is over there and it's going along, and all of a sudden, da 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 da, bop, 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 you know, they've changed places, which a lot of times can either seriously impact the listener as distracting and it taking away from the production, but sometimes it can just add this texture of they perceived that something changed places, or this pad synth player moved over here, zoom, over there, bump, you know, to you know, and joined the keys, and it just, everything went a little bit right for just a second, or some of it did, and only the bass player was left on the left, over on the left, you know, and then back to where they were going before. This whole concept can get really complicated, and you can come up with huge tools as far as helping your production in different sections and movements, considering a moving stereo field and moving things around in different places in different sections of the production, and just moving around things around having fun. Sometimes you want to distract the listener. You just want to go, well, all of a sudden that thing took off from right to left, as a simple example, which is a little bit kind of a distraction. Then all of a sudden, and the vocalist was all of a sudden over here on this other side, and then boom, and then huge stereo field again. Now we're bringing things mono. I mean, moving stereo field, all of a sudden for this one part, they just, and then I come into, yeah, everything's mono, directly center. Yeah, bam, huge stereo field, went huge stereo again, coming out of the mono like that. And that's a huge concept. There are all kinds of uses for a moving stereo field that aren't just making one section and another section sound appropriate and good with what's being played in the instrument complement, that's included in that section, but also moving stereo fields like elaborate things like I just talked about there, going into mono and then expanding into huge stereo. I mean, over exaggerated stereo, and then coming back into normal stereo field. Like, you've got the instrument compilation. This is where you've set it up like this, and then going into the verse, and in this transition, it's like, and then I go, everything came mono, and then and everything went over exaggerated stereo field, and then back into the verse that was this normal thing you had set up here. That can sound funny, but it can add huge amounts of depth to whatever you're doing. That might sound really complicated, but once you get a workflow going and you understand the concept and you start being able to use your automation well and things like that, being able to move things around well, fluently and smoothly, and and having things coming together in equal or unequal things. You want to unequalize something. All of a sudden, the whole thing on the left-hand side of this whole track went mono, but the left-hand side is still stereo for this one thing. Ta-da! And then it went right. Ta-da! Everything's mono on the left side, but it went, stereos. You got all the stereo stuff happening on the right side, and it pinged back and forth there just for one little thing. Something really simple like that. There's lots of different uses for it, but it's a huge concept to take as a valid mixing concept and apply it. Even sometimes you might just do it for one little section on this little break right before the bridge, or at the end of the bridge going into the lead, or at the end of the lead, or something like that, that just you do some wild little thing that adds this really weird kind of cool, uniqueness to whatever you were trying to do, that adds all this extra creative thing happening with this mix that would have otherwise been very static, where you just added a whole new element to it that had nothing to do with the instruments. It was all the same instruments. You just became an audio engineer utilizing a huge mixing tool of moving stereo field to add a whole new element to a static mix, a static stereo field that you just added something else to it that wasn't even in the composition. That really, this can be, you got to watch out. You don't want to step on people's toes if you're working with other people's stuff, but in your own stuff, or you can, relate it to somebody. It's like, well, I could do this with your thing there, and it would do this, bam, bam, whatever, mono, stereo, whap, bam, na 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 na, and it's like, whoa, that was really cool, bro, and it's like added this whole new element that grabbed the attentioner's ear, and it's like, bam, wow, right before that chorus came in with this really cool hook that the band put together, you had this really wild little moving stereo field thing happen that really caught their attention, so they were really focused on this cool hook that this band put together for this chorus. Those are, tools, huge tools to help you get something done and to create something really cool. So I hope you take a moving stereo field into consideration. There's another video on my channel about moving stereo fields, and it's a huge, valid concept. So we hope that you get into that and you start fussing around with that and experimenting with that, because it is an experiment, and you can do all kinds of different things, move things all over the place, and do some really cool stuff. So I'll see you in the next video when we get into a little bit more in-depth mixing concepts.